Okay. I think we are ready to go. Let me make sure that our recording is connected. All right.
Thank you.
I don't know how many other people are going to be here today. Might be just us. I do think that somebody said that they were going to try the Google Meets in. I want to make sure I have the Google Meets tab.
Yeah, it is summer, so
yeah.
Some folks might be.
Yeah, and I think similarly to last time, we may be losing some people due to the Tai Chi program, but
Right. And isn't there a food program at 4?
there is. There's a nutrition class at 4,
So that could be.
that could.
So maybe, if one of those ends for a while, then.
Yes, well, starting next week, Tai Chi is going to be Tuesdays. So.
Tuesday at
12. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I should be able to go to that. I'll make a note to come to that.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see if we can do. Right. Let me make sure that's the recording over here. All right. So I think it's just going to be us unless somebody comes in on Google Meets or unless somebody walks through the door a couple minutes late. So what do you have to recommend for us today?
Well, I've been reading / skimming The Wife, just going to the parts that I liked the best since I had already seen the movie. Mm-hmm. And the part that I did like the best was her husband, the famous writer, even though she was actually the author of the books, mm-hmm. but he took credit for it because if her name was on it, they never would have gotten this far in the public. That's what she was told. That's what she believed. Of course, a woman wrote this. And, but they had all along this unofficial wannabe biographer of him. Mm-hmm. And he is portrayed in the movie. And he's sort of like this kid. They viewed him as this kid that kind of just followed him and just like a fan and all that. But I like how they develop him as really this ominous figure who really has figured out who's been the real writer. And he's really paid attention to how the work of this man, I don't think his name, improved vastly after they got married. So he does confront her. He's confronting her in Finland at the Nobel Prize Awards because he actually shows up there. So I like how he's developed as a person that they really didn't take very seriously, just some kid, into this person who is definitely threatening the status quo of who they are, or who they say they are, and all that. So even though I'm not finished with that book or anything, I'm saying I like that part the best. And so I guess I would recommend it from that standpoint. And the movie is available. The library or will be donated my copy. So that's The Wife.
All right. And I know that you've mentioned that could also be a good book club book. So if we pick our not August, our September book club today, yeah, I think that would be a great book club book for September.
Yeah, because it's about writers. It's literary. It focuses on how women sort of don't get the right attention. It reminds me of something I saw where when women were trying to get in orchestras or symphonies, and when they no longer saw who was playing, they got chosen more.
Oh, right.
They applied in person or were auditioning in person.
Right. I remember that was that the idea of the blind audition, so that you know the interviewer or the person receiving the audition, you know, couldn't be biased. So yeah, that definitely is interesting, and we know that there have been many real life cases where women wrote under like a masculine pseudonym or something like that.
Yeah.
So
That's true. And there's a movie I'll mention. I liked it in a way. I thought it was very weird, very strange, but I still liked it due to the ambiance, and that was the Banshees of Inisherin or something. And it's always a bad sign when you can't remember the name, you can't pronounce it, it's not easy to even repeat, and that's that one. So it was nominated for Best Actor for Colin somebody for Best Actor, and it takes place on an island off of Ireland in the 40s. It was actually an island I was thinking of moving to.
Oh, cool.
One time, you know, before the whole COVID pandemic thing happened. But anyway, so it's just really focused on a village where there's one pub and people pass each other on carts on the two roads. So like if you wanted to stop talking to somebody, it would be very hard because you'd see them all the time. So that's what happens in this story, where these two friends that always used to hang out, there's an older man and a younger man. And, well, the younger man's probably around 50 and the older one's probably 70. And so for some reason, the older man doesn't want to spend time with the younger man anymore for several reasons, but one is he just thinks it's a waste of time hearing about the young man's donkeys or whatever he's talking about. So it's a very kind of unusual setting, and it really comes around to like begrudging on both sides. Like the younger man can't accept that and keeps trying, and then when he keeps trying, the older man holds a grudge and retaliates against the younger man. And it's funny because it's exactly what I heard about the culture from this woman who was from Ireland, and that was before I was considering moving there, or when I was. And she said they're the begrudgers. They hold grudges. So I thought that was really interesting, that was actually would be more of a true to form kind of a thing. So I really appreciated the scenery and everything, while not totally, it's not just the situation, the problem, but how it was handled that was kind of, you know, weird. And then the name of the movie was just the name of a novel that the older man was going to write. So it really didn't play into anything or describe anything. So I didn't think that was great.
So there were no actual banshees in the movie. See, I'd heard that title and like seen it around, and I was like,
yeah, that kind of turned me off too. And yet the truth is, it doesn't really relate to anything or describe anything. Not only that, my complaint is I can't pronounce it, I couldn't remember it, and all that. So.
Okay. Well, that is good good to know because that was kind of on my to watch list for a while. So that's I was expecting Banshees, so I'm a little disappointed that.
There's very few characters in the movie, and then there's one sideline thing where a younger man who's friends with the other younger man, but he's even younger, and he's kind of in love with his sister, and Seth mentions it to her, but she moves away off the island because she doesn't like the drama that's going on between those two men, and then he ends up dead in the water. I shouldn't have given that away. Anyway, that might have played into the whole begrudging thing where somebody couldn't get over something. I'm not sure. It wasn't real clear.
Okay. Well, that does sound interesting.
And I thought to myself, well, that's true. He might not have wanted to hear about the man's donkeys for 2 hours, but it might have helped the younger man to talk about what he was going through with his donkeys or something. So I could see the issues on both sides, of their issue. But that's what it was about.
Okay. That sounds interesting. I brought a couple of books to recommend. One fiction and one nonfiction. The nonfiction book that I wanted to recommend is A Death in the Rainforest by Kulik. And this is a nonfiction book. The author is a linguist who studies rare languages. And if you know anything about Papua New Guinea, you know that it is the most...
I've been to Papua New Guinea.
Oh, awesome! Awesome! So
Can I turn the fans on?
Oh, the fans.
The
Sure.
fan? Or you want to?
Okay. We do have... There we go. Get some more fan in here. All right, so Papua New Guinea is the most linguistically diverse country in the world, which, that was just like a factoid that I'd heard at one point. I hadn't really thought about it. So where did you go in Papua New Guinea?
I was in, it's the main town, Port Moresby.
Okay. Well, this book is written from the perspective of a linguist who is studying one of the rare languages that's only spoken in this one tiny village.
Okay, I did meet somebody at the missionary home, and he said that he studied all the different tribes, and of course, well, they all have different languages, but there were so many different tribes, and he just said you could spend 20 years researching just one of them.
Right, and that's what I thought was interesting about this book is that each tiny village has its own language, and people from that village they're all multilingual because they have to know all of the villages in order to be able to communicate. Although in this one village, in Gapun village, the local language is kind of dying out because the people are all learning to speak Tok-Pisin, which is the national language. And so there's kind of a shift as the villages are becoming more sort of connected and urbanized. Hey! Hey! Come on in! Sit down! Okay. I was talking about A Death in the Rainforest.
Pardon me?
I was talking about A Death in the Rainforest.
Oh, okay.
And we're on Google Meets and Facebook Live. Anyway, so the local village language is dying out, and so this linguist went there to study it, while there were still native speakers there. And so he writes about how these linguistic changes have affected the community, and questions like, is shifting from the small village having its own distinct language to a national language, is that kind of taking away their cultural distinctiveness? Is that more allowing them to integrate and sort of nationalize into a more urban setting? And so,
like, how is it affecting their culture?
yeah, how is it, and you know, some of the ideas that they have around languages, and ideas that you can express in one language and not another. So I thought that aspect was very interesting. I thought it was also very interesting that in this rural village, where they don't, not that they don't get information from the outside world, but it's very filtered and like multiple steps removed. And so sometimes, because of that multiple step removedness and language barriers, sometimes there's just some very profound miscommunications and intercultural misunderstandings. So I thought I thought it was very interesting if you are interested in, you know, small rural languages, if you're interested in Papua New Guinea, if you're interested in, you know, rural cultures in an urbanizing world, or any of those related topics, I would highly recommend this book.
So it's nonfiction?
It is nonfiction. And I have a fiction book to recommend, but I'll let you go next since you told me.
Oh. The book I wanted to recommend is an old one. It's called Out Stealing Horses by Petterson. It is, I can help him here, it's Scandinavian, right? No, it's in Norway.
I have not read this book, so I cannot help you.
Yes, you have. You recommended it to me years ago. Out Stealing Horses.
I have no memory of that whatsoever.
Okay. Anyway, it's just a good read. It's fiction, of course, I guess. About in a relationship between father and son. And the plot, the whole story of it is not to me what's attractive. It's just that it's the way it's written.
Well, what is it about? Because maybe you can jog my memory.
See, I've read several books since then. It's several weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, I believe it's father and son. And they're trying to maybe reestablish a relationship, a good relationship. And the out stealing horses is just a phrase that they use. It has nothing to do with stealing horses. It's as though, seems as though at one time the father says, so what have you been doing? And it's out stealing horses.
Just, it's a phrase.
It's a phrase.
Like with hiking, like I hiked with an older retired gentleman, and he said, I'm going to go see a man about a horse. So he was taking a bathroom break.
Yeah. It's just that it, you know, it's like a secret joke. You know?
Yeah, just a phrase.
Yeah, it's just a private communication. But it's just one of those. Maybe the reason I liked it so much is because it's so different from everything else I've been reading. I'm just assuming that, you know, the translation is accurate, but the translator also, I believe, has a real talent for translation. That's all I can say.
Because it's a translated book.
It is. And many times, we read those books and it says, author blah, 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 translated by Dahlia. But at least in this case, I think the translator deserves a great deal of credit for getting the tone of the story. I'm assuming just right. That's just one.
So that's what you liked about it. Did you get a chance to read The Lost Brothers?
I did. I have to say, it is not my favorite genre at all.
Nonfiction.
No, just the true crime.
True crime.
Yeah. It's, I cannot, I have to say, cannot relate to that. That style of writing. And the author in the Lost Boys was
Lost Brothers.
Lost Brothers, yeah. He had written his main thrust in his writing was more like medical writing, right?
Well, he's written some other things about history in Minnesota. Some things. I liked how he wrote just because it's from an investigative, journalistic standpoint.
It's not so much investigative as it is just relating the past, I guess. This is what we think happened.
Did you watch the video of our discussion on it?
I didn't.
Okay.
Well,
Did everybody else like it?
Well, I liked it, obviously, but after we discussed it, I read it again, and one thing that I got out of that is that the main suspect, Lloyd Paddock, who was going to overlay his basement with cement that very weekend, and that was on a Saturday that the boys disappeared. So he already had the cement there and had a friend lined up to help him. So that jumped out at me and solidified for me that theory because the cement was already there. I don't know if you have to mix it or,
Right.
There's a lot of work involved
Right.
because you just get the bags and stuff. But the fact that he already had it there made another crime of opportunity for me. Because number one, the boys showed up without their older brother. He was already annoyed because they probably had a habit of cutting through yards. And I remember doing that too, and getting in trouble with some people for it. Plus the fact that that cement was already there. And then of course, what they learned later was that the friend who was lined up to help him, and he said, no, I did it myself. He had worked all night on Saturday. So that to me was like, oh, okay. There were several things that lined up there.
But what I thought was it's just total speculation. It's like you just kind of search around and say, well, hey, this guy's putting cement in his basement.
Right, but that wasn't the only thing. He had been accused of molesting a girl in the neighborhood, and then that mother also said she thought that he had molested and killed the boys. So there was also that.
I understand that. It's just that it's all
circumstantial.
Absolutely.
It's not enough.
So to point fingers at him is to say it is to be treated wrongly. I think there's no evidence.
Right. There were just more arrows pointing in that direction. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out about the cement already being there. And then when the man's wife, who was going to help him, said, aren't you going to help search for the boys? He said they're not worth it. So just a combination of all that, plus, putting together my experiences of cutting through yards. And I realized that some people didn't like it. Some people might have not said anything or whatever, but in one case they did, and they even had me in their kitchen yelling at me and saying they were going to call the police. So anyway.
I think a lot of those situations happen when it's what do you call it? An recurring thing.
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
that
It's recurring.
people just cut through the yards, and then other people. And then
It's like it's their habit, and you can almost see a pathway.
When you were a kid, did you go through people's yards?
I lived on a farm.
Well, I mean, I know, but did you go through other people's, like, farms or, like, because that came up at book club. And I was like, by the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Farmland.
Yeah.
The older generation.
Sure. If we had lived in town, I suspect I would be much more like I am today, and no, we don't cross, stay on the sidewalk or whatever. But sure, we cut across farmland.
But yeah, that was another thing that we talked about at book club was like that shift. Because like by the time I was a kid, you wouldn't have let me go out by myself when I was 4 years old, you know?
Well, 4, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
There were 3 of them.
Yeah, but even 8, 9.
And it was to a familiar location.
Just a couple blocks away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was fine.
because I think at that time I would have like walked in the neighborhood because there was a neighbor kid that I was friends with and I'd go to her house, but not just like just walk, just go, you know.
That was a whole different era.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we were talking about. It was like that cultural change.
Because during your growing up, we knew, we heard, there was all kinds of information out there about, what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 50s in Minnesota, I doubt there was any.
That wasn't a thing.
There was no danger.
At that time, yeah, 1951.
Nobody saw any danger.
So that's what, to me, makes the story more
Right.
unusual.
I'm thinking this would be a little bit after that time, in the late 50s, but I remember riding my bicycle 3.5 miles into town.
And that was no big deal.
No big deal. No.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it wasn't when I was growing up either. Just really no big deal.
And I think of maybe a lot
No
of it had to do,
questions by parents or anything.
some of it had to do with location, I think, but even city kids were not monitored and closely watched,
Right.
As the way they are today. So
So,
I think part of that is just the availability of news. Those kinds of things may have happened when we were kids, but it wasn't. We didn't have all
the
news
widespread
coverage.
media, yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, of course, things like that did happen.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. And you might have heard about it somehow or in the newspaper, but not like they're covering the story on Bloodline Detectives or the crime
Right.
shows
Right.
and so on and
Right.
so forth.
When I was in 5th grade, in the next classroom, in the 6th grade classroom, there was a student who got so frustrated that he pulled out a switchblade and stabbed his teacher.
You were there?
Mhm.
In the classroom?
Mhm.
Wow.
But it was like, well, today you might read about that on national news.
Right, but not then.
Not then.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
No, it was, I didn't, of course, at the time I didn't follow up on news or anything, we just knew that that's what happened.
Right, you'd watch TV, but that was more like the national news.
Yeah, and it wasn't even on our local.
And then there was local, yeah, not on
Not even on ours, because our little town didn't have the news
the local
information.
station.
But it was just, and also at the same time, I knew the kid. It wasn't like, oh my God, a crime. No, it was, oh boy, we just got overlooked and he's been mad at the teacher. So in my own mind, I think probably I excused it. You shouldn't have done that, but it wasn't like a heinous crime that we might read about today.
Well, depending on how serious the injury was.
Right. But, the teacher went into the next classroom to get help. And I think, told the class, just pull out a book and read or whatever. It wasn't anywhere near fatal,
was superficial?
Not a switch knife, a pocket knife.
Okay, so it was superficial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
But there was another friend. We were talking about something about the danger and how dangerous it is in the classroom these days, and the metal detectors and all this, and there was a guy probably about my age, and he said, shoot, I remember when I was in kindergarten, there was a kid who brought a chain to school, and he was, swimming, hitting people. But it was like, we knew that kid, he was mean, It wasn't like...
Some things were taken more seriously today if you did that, because of other things.
Probably because, partly because, I think it probably happens more often today, maybe just because there are more people. Maybe the world is more frustrated, I don't know. But the things that we hear, like on the news, such and such happened, so on and so on. Like road rage. That's been here forever. Even in the horse and buggy days.
But people did drive more politely.
Supposedly they did, yeah.
Anything else you would recommend? Or movies or anything?
Another book I would recommend is called Hang the Moon by Jeannette. She's also the author of Silver Medal, the White Castle, is it? And when I read her first two books, they were about her childhood, and I remember thinking, I thought I had a horrible childhood. There was her parents were practically nomads. They just pick up and move. And I think this might have been set in the 70s. But they were like what today we would call absolutely irresponsible parents. But back in the day, the kids just kind of made their own way. They survived. The father had a real problem with alcohol. But I don't think I remember her talking about there being any intervention. With the social workers or anything. I don't think there was that. And they were in, I believe, West Virginia.
And there was a lot of that during the Depression, too. People lived in homeless camps or whatever.
Well, this family always stayed together.
Yeah.
But just reading, you think, how could that mother do that? Or how could that dad do that? Or it was just. I think that's. Those are her earlier books. This Hang the Moon is a little bit different. I like the author. I would recommend it to almost anybody except my really close friends, because if they didn't like it, I would question friendship.
There's a movie made in the last few years called The Glass Castle.
That's it, The Glass Castle.
Oh, okay. I saw the movie.
Yeah, see, that's kind of her memoir.
And she ended up going to Harvard for being a writer. She was the author.
She's a writer.
She got a scholarship or something.
Yes.
Yeah, the way they portrayed her parents. They were professional homeless people that would go live in empty buildings and things like that, like they knew.
And they thought it was
Woody Harrelson.
perfectly fine.
Right, that was
the thing.
later, like after the Depression, yeah.
The parents,
That was just what
the parents thought, well, okay, whenever they had, like they had to move around a lot, if I remember right. You know, because, well, the register or whatever, so they moved. And the parents would be like, hey, we're having an adventure. And they, you know, really hype it as something, something positive.
How they framed it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Woody Harrelson is good for roles like that.
Oh.
He played the father.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the actress that played the mother is one of my favorite actresses. I can't quite think of her name offhand. And then the actress who played the daughter, she had won an Oscar for Room. Bree something. Didn't even see her.
I think I may have seen clips of it.
Brie Larson, I think.
Where the daughter was riding in a taxi and she saw her mother, a homeless person going through the trash. You remember that?
I don't remember that scene actually. But I know she was dating somebody and it was a real conundrum in her mind how to explain the family she came from or how to introduce them.
He might have been an investment banker or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they married, I think.
Mm-hmm. So how she was.
And she worked, she was a journalist. She is a journalist.
Yeah, that was I recommend the movie. But, and then one scene where I don't know, the parents were trying to climb into a house or something and the mom was like hanging there. It was just this big scene and that was like no big deal to them, just another
Well, if I remember
day.
right, at least in the book, the mother and father are fighting.
Oh, maybe they were fighting.
And the father, of course, is probably drunk. And the mother tries to jump out the window to get away from him.
Maybe
and
that
he
was
grabs hold of her
Okay.
legs.
And she was like hanging there for a while, yeah.
And so the kids are down in the yard, and they're like, don't drop her. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess I would recommend the movie. But, you know, speaking of people's childhoods, I was in the laundromat yesterday in Brunswick and picking up a People magazine from a couple years ago. And the actress Charlene Tilton, she was in Dallas.
I remember that.
Now,
she was the little short.
Yeah, spunky blonde, really, the big smile. And I never was into TV shows or anything, but I did, you know, read about it and saw clips. I remember her dancing in a disco with some other characters. I mean, I was aware. But anyway, so it's like, whatever happened to Charlene Tilton? Well, she, what I did know about her is that back then, in the days when she was 23, she married a country singer named Johnny Lee, who was 35. And the marriage only lasted a couple of years, but I remember reading in the tabloid that he was giving a concert, and she, at one point, she dressed up as a charwoman and was on the side of the stage, like mopping, and it was supposed to be like a surprise for Johnny Lee. Oh. And it didn't go over very well.
Well, she's interrupting his act.
And so, anyway, he had a big hit. I'm sure you've heard of it, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places.
Yeah.
Big hit, yeah. So anyway, so I was reading about her, and her mother was schizophrenic. So when she was growing up, it was just horrible. Her mother would like run down the street naked and or abandon her, and she would live with other people while mother was institutionalized, and her mother would only urinate in Tupperware, so she could never bring anybody home. And it was just like a horrible existence. She didn't write a book or anything. It was just in the article. And so, and then the marriage was a disaster in the making. I mean, that was, I already knew that, but.
Well, one thing, people who grow up without a role model, or, you know, knowledge of what a good marriage is, I'm sorry, you're almost destined to do.
Right, but she was successful as an actress, I mean, on that show. And then years later, she's a character actress. She acts in TV movies and Christian movies and stuff. So she has a career. And her daughter is 40. So I looked up her daughter. You know, I looked up Johnny Lee, and then I saw right there her daughter was singing backup. Her daughter's 40 now on that song, "Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places" for Johnny Lee. And her daughter's
At the time it was made?
Huh?
At the time it was
No,
made?
currently.
Okay.
Like in concert with her dad. And so she has a beautiful voice. So something good came out of that. She had a beautiful daughter who can sing. And she has a couple grandchildren. So it was just interesting that she always had a positive attitude, always had a smile on her face, with just an absolutely horrid childhood. Like she would go live with different relatives and then overhear the kids saying, you know, when is she leaving and stuff like that. So it just reminds me that, you know, having a bad child is just not uncommon at all.
True. What disturbs me about that kind of thing is that people will point to that and say, you see, you could have a bad childhood and still grow up and be successful, instead of that being the anomaly. That's
Right.
not the
That's
norm.
more the exception.
Yeah. So is that, you know, instead of pointing and saying, you see, you could do that. Well, no, not necessarily.
So it didn't mention she was ever remarried or anything, but yeah, so I'm glad, you know, she made the best of it. So the charwoman thing, yeah, that didn't go over too well, but.
Well, not as a surprise, especially.
A surprise, yeah.
I was at a lunch in St. Simon's, and I left at 1:30 so I could be here. Traffic going off St. Simon's was miserable. It took me about 20 minutes to get off St. Simon's. The traffic, gosh, yeah, it's like I'm never going back there.
Well, I mean, it's summer. I mean, the end of
Yes,
time
I know, and I usually avoid the whole place.
Yeah,
during
lunch
summer.
rush.
But I thought that, you know, the holiday weekend would be, you know, that would be over and done with. But somebody at lunch had said, well, no, I think a lot of these people came for the week.
Right, yeah, they do. That's true.
So, touristic. What's your other book?
Okay. So, my other book is a novel, Phaedra by Laura Shepperson.
Phaedra?
Phaedra.
Phaedra.
And I don't know if y'all know the story of Phaedra from Greek mythology. So,
Does it have anything to do with the book?
yes.
Oh, then you'll have to tell us. The favorite from Greek mythology.
Okay.
I remember.
So, as anyone who has attended recommendation group knows, I really love modern retellings of older stories. And this novel is a modern retelling of the story of Phaedra. I wanted to say if y'all remember reading the big read book Circe in 2021, it's kind of in the same vein.
Okay.
So Phaedra in mythology was the wife of Theseus, and she was a princess, and she married Theseus, who was a prince, and he was this noble hero, and he had a son, Hippolytus, and
They had a son?
no, he had a son before he met Phaedra. So Hippolytus was Phaedra's stepson. And in the original, there's not really an original version when you're talking about Greek mythology, but in the well-known versions of the story, Hippolytus was not interested in any romantic relationships. He was, what we would today say is asexual or aromantic.
This is a son?
Yeah, Phaedra's stepson. his son. But Phaedra fell in love with her stepson because we can't have Greek mythology without some incest. And he turned her down, and she, in rage and in evil womanhood, falsely accused him of trying to rape her. And this caused Theseus, Phaedra's husband, Hippolytus' father, to disown his son and curse him. And in different versions of the story, Hippolytus dies. Sometimes he's eaten by seahorses, or he's cursed and dies because his evil, wicked stepmother did this to him and resulted in him being cursed and dying. And this is kind of...
Use that word because that saying, I'll have to
not that thing in particular.
It was a million stories.
Yes, and definitely a trope codifier for the evil stepmother trope. So in this novel by Laura Shepperson, it is retelling that story from Phaedra's point of view. And so in this version of the story...
And Phaedra is the father.
Phaedra is the stepmother.
Oh, stepmother, okay.
Stepmother. And in this version of the story, Hippolytus does attack Phaedra. She's telling the truth. But no one believes her. So it's more about, she knows what happened. No one believes her. Her story is not the one that gets canonized or finalized.
And her story is that he came onto her.
Yes, that her stepson attacked her. And I really like the way that the story is written. It's told from multiple characters' point of view, but Phaedra is the main character, and it is mostly from her point of view. And it opens with this trial. Hippolytus is on trial for attacking Phaedra, and everyone is convinced that, of course, Phaedra is evil. She's an evil, seductive woman. Hippolytus is innocent. But Phaedra is sort of trying to get her story on the record. So if you like I like modern retellings of older stories, if you like well-known stories told from a different character's point of view, which I'm also a big fan of, if you like, modern retellings of mythology.
Let me ask you a question. What's the time frame on this, the novel? I mean, is it set in the same time?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's not like, set in today. It's ancient Greece.
Okay.
I don't know if there's like a year, but it's
Same
ancient
time
Greece.
frame.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed reading Phaedra, and I don't know if anybody else would enjoy it. I don't know if it would be a book clubbable book, but
The great thing about books, though, is that there's enough of them around to appeal to every single type of interest. Some of my friends don't like the books that I like, and so we have to bypass that. It's hard to. That's why. I don't even know, because bestsellers are all by genre.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's gonna like that. What's his name? James Patterson. They're James Patterson fans, but other people, other readers say, "Oh, I don't want to be part of that."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very specific.
Mm-hmm. And probably Stephen King too. Although I guess I hear Stephen King writes other things other than scary books, but I've not tried it.
Okay. So I came prepared with 2 books. Oh, I was hoping you would recommend Lady Justice, because I haven't finished it.
Oh.
But if you don't, I will recommend it next time after I finish it.
Oh, well, I think I've listened to it twice. It's an excellent, I think, excellent, it's nonfiction, the kind of the history or stories about women attorneys who have made a big contribution to our society.
Yeah, and I'm like part way into it. I have not finished it, but I'm really enjoying it. So even though I guess I haven't finished it, I guess I would like to.
Is it
recommend
nonfiction?
Mm-hmm.
Again, Dahlia, We'll have to look it up.
Okay, I don't have it in front of me, and I feel naked. I don't have any devices on my person.
Oh.
And I don't have.
But it's fairly recent. I think maybe published in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because toward the end, she goes into the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just this story of very, very influential and attorneys who made a difference, especially to women in this, well, my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them you might have heard of, some of them you had no idea. What was the first attorney that she says nobody will know his name?
I don't remember because I like read it and then I read something else and then I meant to come back to it and then didn't. I still have it like in my office, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm liking that one.
It reminds me of a movie I watched. I'm trying to think of the name of the actress. She's older, from England, but it was a true story. And the lawyer or the lady got the bomb. Somehow it had to do with the bomb and getting that off the table or mitigating. It was like a really big deal, the subject was, but she wasn't really well known about it, so it was worthwhile movie.
Part of the reason, and probably even from this book, the Lady Justice, part of the reason these women are not well known is because they're women.
Who was the lady who was in? She won an Oscar for. I'll look it up.
What was in what?
I'll look up her name and then I'll look up the movie. I can't think of either one. She was in Notes on a Scandal. You haven't seen Notes on a Scandal? Have you seen Notes on a Scandal?
Emma Thompson?
No, Notes on a Scandal is that was with Cate Blanchett and this actress, an older actress. She's very well thought of, very admired.
You don't mean Helen. You don't mean Helen.
No.
Judi Dench?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so it was a Judi Dench movie.
Oh.
That I'll look it up in a second. But anyway, no, I would recommend Notes on a Scandal. That's about an English school, and Judi Dench is a teacher, very strict and by the book and successful. She knows how to handle kids and stuff, and she's nearing retirement. And then Cate Blanchett comes in as a new teacher, and it's notes because she writes a journal on her life. And she's a gay person, Judi Dench is, and had another, one of the women left the school or whatever, another school teacher, there was an issue. But anyway, so Cate Blanchett comes in, and she has a crush on Cate Blanchett, but Cate Blanchett is straight, she's married, and has a teenage daughter and an autistic son. But nevertheless, she does like Cate Blanchett. So she's writing in a journal. And so Cate Blanchett kind of takes advantage of the fact that Judi Dench likes her, because then Kate starts an affair with one of the boys, like a 15.
One of her students, yeah.
Yeah. And so then Judi Dench wants to parlay that into, well, okay, you break it off. You promise to me you'll break it off. And that way she could get in the good graces of Cate Blanchett and be more to her than just a friend, maybe. So there's all this going on. And so Kate's like, oh, thank you. Thank you. And of course she doesn't break it off. And so a bunch of stuff happens, and there's a really bit, I don't want to tell too much, but have you seen it?
I have, yeah.
Okay. I like that scene where the parents show up, and, well, anyway, I'll let you watch the movie. But let me find the other one that Judi Dench was in. So what was good about that movie is that it's narrated by Judi Dench reading her journal. And then, of course, it comes out where they said, wait a minute, you knew about this, they say to Judi Dench, and you didn't do something. So there's all that.
Is it in the library?
Hmm?
Is the movie?
Oh, yeah, you can get it from the library, yeah. So there's all that, going on. And then the boy was pretending to be a needy boy whose parents beat him up, for Kate to feel sorry. Everybody was doing something.
Yeah, I remember that movie because it was, because she like had a teenage daughter and then was having an affair with a boy like her
Who was
daughter's
young,
age.
yeah, or even younger.
And it was very disturbing that it was very disturbing, but
I'm reading a book now called Cloisters by Katy Hayes, I think it is. It's just on the other side of this group. It's like, I would not recommend that to anybody.
yeah.
Yeah, you can
You can unrecommend.
Yeah, definitely.
But just like you were saying, sometimes something might not be for you, but might be for somebody else.
Absolutely.
So it can still come up in the context of, I didn't like this, but somebody else might. So.
Right. It just, see, the first half of the book, it's taken so long to read because every other page you have to stop and look up the word. I told my friend, it's like a 400 level book.
And Notes on a Scandal is a novel, too, in case that.
It is. And the ending of the novel is different than the ending of the movie.
And the really funny thing I thought about, because it's kind of British humor, is that the last scene in that movie, Notes on a Scandal, is where Judi Dench has moved on and is chatting up a new younger woman at the park. Like, she moves on pretty quickly. She's lost her job, and she was near retirement anyway, so it just, I don't know, it just seemed kind of funny.
One of the things I think, though, that kind of bothers me about describing the situations is, like you say, Judi Dench is really interested in Kate, and yet it's almost like we overlook the close female friendships that can exist without any kind of sexual overtones or attraction.
Well, they did have that. They had a friendship bond.
Well,
I'd like to find the name of that movie.
I mean, I do.
What do you mean when you say?
Well, I'm also remembering, like, when I was in middle school and high school, I had a best friend, and we were together everywhere, all the time, always together, and people would tease us. see, that's your girlfriend doing that. Or, we never see you without her, or something like that. And there was nothing whatsoever about that kind of, the different kind of attraction. We were good friends. It's almost like the world doesn't recognize friendship.
Okay.
Well, you have to keep in mind when people are writing drama, there actually has to be drama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I try to keep that in mind, is
Right.
that, if they just wrote boring stuff, then that wouldn't be the same.
It's like, that's the kind of thing I like, is human relationships. And most of the books I like are not about books where something happens.
Yeah,
It's-
then that's the
it's-
kind of books you like.
Yeah.
They're just,
I remember
yeah.
when we read one of Ann Tyler's books for book club several years ago, and one of the people in the group had said, "Who wants to read this? Nothing happens."
Right, it's your taste and
Yeah.
the journey, in other
But the
words.
character
the journey.
developments,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think. To me, that's the importance of reading is learning about people, not about what happens or what blew up.
Yeah, I like books with interesting characters.
So the one I was thinking, it might have been called Red Joan. I can't say for sure. The one with Judi Dench. A suburban widow conceals a double life as a Soviet spy in this true life tale of passion, courage, and betrayal. But, I know it was a true story, and I know that that she was in it. I've enjoyed many of her movies. Yeah, I thought she was very good.
Judi Dench. I'm really ignorant about movies. Or TV.
Because you're not really into movies. It's like when I watched the movie Elvis, and I have become an Elvis fan. I understand now and I get it and everything. But when he's on stage dancing and performing in Las Vegas, and the actor does a really good job. But it's like you're not seeing a lot of that. Then you're seeing some other drama happening in the audience with his manager or whatever. So the point is that for me, I would just like to enjoy his performance. I don't need a drama to be happening, but that's just how movies are. And sometimes, if it's a mini-series or 2-part or 3-part, then there is more of an opportunity to focus on just some of those other things rather than the turn of the drama.
Dozens of Elvis concerts on YouTube.
Elvis what?
Concerts.
Oh, I know that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I watch it.
you can see the real thing.
No, I'm just making a commentary on movies and drama and how they do it. I'm not complaining about my lack of opportunity to watch Elvis. I'm just agreeing with you that, they'll take something and then it just, instead of enjoying it for what it is, they're turning, the story is turning.
They're adding drama.
You're right. So that's a typical, way that movies are made. Or written, I should say.
Okay? So next, later this month, is Alice Network.
Yes, the Alice Network is for later in July, and August is the Children Act, and today we are picking the book for September.
Does the library have copies of Chasing Horses or Stealing Horses?
There are many.
See, the other book that I was reading that I would recommend, I know that it's fairly new, and you can't get it from other libraries until
6 months after the library receives it. It was before you came in, but we were talking about The Wife by Meg Wolitzer as a good September book club pick.
okay.
But so
So here's a copy of it here.
I don't
Get
know.
rated
Is
alternative.
it fictional?
So what do y'all think? The wife.
Fine. The only thing I want to just throw out there is that I kind of think we should throw in some nonfiction every once in a while.
I agree, although we just did
I know.
do a
Yeah,
nonfiction.
well, in that genre, then I would recommend The Lost Boys, the Cave Boys.
Okay, that one we don't, the library does not have copies of, so.
Oh, and they can't buy a copy?
We're kind of in between where we can buy things, because we're on a, July to June count, it's complicated. I have put in a request for it, but we don't have copies now. If we do get a copy, I would definitely like to put that on the list.
Is it available from Pines?
No.
There's podcasts on that as well.
Yeah, but so for.
And it's kind of similar because it wasn't solved. You know, it has a similar, the story hasn't. But they did develop a suspect. In this case, the latest podcast people developed a suspect. In the case of the Lost Brothers, the suspect was mentioned in the book, but not the podcast.
But that I don't believe that authorities put a lot of credence in that neighbor guy.
Oh no, they didn't have anybody at the time. That was decades later that the suspects were developed, not just him. There was a couple of others.
Oh.
So at the time, same thing with the cave boys. They didn't. I mean, they searched for years in those caves, and they didn't even think there was a suspect involved. And so it was kind of those are some similarities in those two stories. So some people might not like it because they didn't like the fact that the Lost Brothers was not solved. So they might have the same feeling about the Lost Boys. But anyway, it's some people might find it interesting. So.
Okay. Oh, for September, and we don't have a lot of people here. I would kind of want to go with the wife over the other one, just because it does sound like it has more of a plot, and I think more book club members do more prefer those plottier books.
Yeah, okay. It's more accessible. And, you know, I might have been moved away by then, but I'll try to join in by Zoom.
All right, yeah, awesome.
So did the library have copies of the what?
We can get them, because it'll be September. We have copies of the Alice Network, this month's book club book, available for checkout.
Oh,
If you want to get a copy of the Alice Network before you go.
I'm listening, but I can also check the book out.
All right.
Yeah,
And then next month is the Children Act.
I don't know anything about it.
Did you see the movie?
That's right.
There's a 17-year-old boy he's like 17 and a half. And he's a Jehovah's Witness and doesn't believe in blood transfusions, and so he wants to refuse the blood transfusion, and it goes to court because in the British legal system, under the law, the Children Act, you have to be 18 to make your own medical decisions, and he's 17 and a half. So he's just misses the cutoff. And
Is this fiction?
it's fiction, yes.
Okay.
There are real legal cases
Okay.
where like children and teenagers have gone to court to make their own medical choices. But this particular story is fiction. And then kind of develops a
So the law could force him to have blood transfusion?
yes, because he's not 18.
Parents?
The parents were on his side.
They don't get to choose?
No.
Okay.
because if it's medically necessary.
According to the physicians.
Right.
And according to physicians, there are no moral issues.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, so that, but then the story goes on that the judge rules on the case, and then the boy, grows up and kind of develops a relationship with the judge.
Oh.
So it's a really interesting story, actually. I think there is the potential to have some interesting discussion around it. Yeah. Absolutely. And nobody came on Google Meets again, but that's okay, That's okay.